Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may be. Thank you for taking your time to hear this presentation from me. My name is Frank Dickson, and the folks with the Acronis Global Cyber Summit 2020 have invited me here today to talk to you a little bit about rethinking the approach to IT and cybersecurity. I am from IDC. I lead our global cybersecurity services practice, and I'm glad to be with you here today. I think I want to start off this conversation, right, in terms of talking about the future of cybersecurity and IT. Really, let's talk about the CEO's current agenda, right? So as we look at mapping the enterprise, we see that there's a host of agenda items that CEOs are looking to create. Because remember, CEOs aren't necessarily just looking at IT, right? They're looking to create a differentiator, right? They're looking to introduce digital transformation to improve, their future interactions with their customers, how they can leverage intelligence to improve operations, how they can improve digital infrastructure, how they can increase their connectedness, how do they create next generation operations, and how do they embed trust, right? Engendering that trusted relationship with our customers. And as we mapped out these agenda items, it's one thing to map out the agenda items. The second part you have to do is validate, right? Do CEOs indeed care about these items? So as we surveyed CEOs in 2020, we see that yes, indeed. You can see the percentages of CEOs that rate these items as being significant or more important in the next 5 years, right? The future of customers and intelligence and trust, right? These are the agenda items that CEOs are fundamentally looking to accomplish to create an advantage in the marketplace, right? To forward digital transformation, to make a differentiated impact, not only with their customers, but to improve their profitability. So as we look to 2021 and we start once again surveying CEOs, we see this theme start to arise, right? And it wasn't just a theme in security, it was a theme across all of these future of practices, right? This concept of rethinking and let's not kid ourselves, right? This rethinking is very much a reflection of the impact that COVID has had, right? We've heard this phrase that we've seen 2 years of digital transformation happen in 2 months from that famous quote from the Microsoft CEO, right? But as we survey CEOs, we start seeing these themes, right? And we start seeing these rethinking themes, right? So as we talk about trust, we're seeing that the budgets for modern software-defined secure remote access solutions will quadruple as we see the flaws in VPN, right? We're looking to access new talent. 60% of organizations will seek to close their 14% shortage of professional developers with remote employees by 2020, right? It's this whole idea, the branch of one connectivity architecture, right? Where by 2023, enterprises will see a 30% boost in productivity by re-architecting their networks and to include a branch of one operating model. It's this idea and this concept of, hey, some of these issues and trends were always there, right? But COVID has shook us into rethinking our approaches. And so as we go forward in this conversation, I'd like to focus on that idea of rethinking. But our premise in this rethinking is not just one of, hey, COVID changed things. Our premise here is, hey, complexity is the enemy of security. And I think one of the things that we're missing in this rethinking is we have unintentionally introduced complexity, a complexity that is not friendly to security and one that we have to address, right? In our tools and the way we go to market and the way that we deal with security moving forward. Now, this complexity of cybersecurity has been around for quite some time. This slide that I'm about ready to present you, I actually created this in 2017 on a plane, right? I was flying to a vendor who wanted to talk to me about the importance of IoT security. I was like, I don't think you understand the bigger trends. It's not just about protecting a single IoT device, right? The the issues that CISOs are having to deal with are broad, right? So that our cybersecurity reality is, first of all, we got really smart people like that are trying to attack our systems, right? And it's not even the smart people don't have to be that smart, right? We can on the dark web find tools that will enable even a person with weak IT skills with tremendous power, right? We're seeing a proliferation of tool sets, right? As the cybersecurity threat has grown, we've introduced new tools to address each of those threats. And so now we're seeing 40 and 45 and 50 different security vendors in some instances with as many as 100 different security products, right? And as we're dealing with this, we're noting, hey, what is cloud? Cloud is just another environment, but we're not adding a cloud. We're adding multiple clouds, and we're adding multiple IaaS environments and PaaS environments and hundreds of SaaS environments, right? Which has resulted in the death of the perimeter, right? We are no longer able to control the environments that we have to protect. On top of that, we're understaffed, right? The scarcity of qualified security information professionals is just a given. We've seen a continued growth of compliance, right? Privacy has created this whole new flood of standards, and it's not just a standard, right? Almost every jurisdiction seems to have their own privacy regulations, and furthermore, cybercrime is a business. You know, ransomware is all about the monetization of crime, right? And this is the reality that doesn't seem to change. It just seems to get worse as we go on and on and on. So dealing with this complexity with a more integrated rethinking of our approaches to security is important. Now, on top of this, right, we see digital transformation, right? We realize that we're injecting technology into our systems, connecting things that once weren't connected, right, to try and create an advantage in our with customers, create empathy at scale, create transparency at scale, right, improve our operational efficiencies. But right at the fundamental basis of this is hyperconnectivity. Things that weren't connected before are now connected. And the fuel of this is our data, and protecting and rethinking from an access perspective to a data perspective is increasingly important as we move forward in security. Now, if that weren't enough, the people that we're dealing with are now changing, right? So as we moved into digital transformation, as we moved into making, interjecting technology and decisions, our buyers have changed. 50% of tech spending now comes from outside of the IT department, right? And these line of business buyers are now augmented by a whole new generation of buyer, the millennial buyer, which is now made up of 35% of the global workforce. These are people that were born and raised under devices being usable. And of course, we have the digital CIO buyer, right? Almost a third of CIOs see their role as driving innovation in the business. It's no longer about maintaining the infrastructure. It's about driving results, right? Complexity, complexity, complexity. Now, on top of that complexity, we've got this joke, right? Who led digital transformation company? Was it the CEO? Was it the CTO? Or was it COVID-19? Well, the CEO may be leading it, but what's really driving it? What's really fueling it? What is the reality? It's COVID, right? Because as we think of what normal was, in Europe, 16% of our workers worked at home before COVID. After COVID, holy cow, we've almost seen a threefold increase, right? 41% of our of workers in Europe are now working at home. And it's not going to go back to where it was, right? Once we have a vaccine, most are projecting that 27% of workers is still going to be done at home. Right. And what we're seeing in Europe is not really any different than what we're seeing in other places, right? In North America, in Asia Pacific, and EMEA, we're seeing, a lot of the majority of people were doing work in facility. Now a ton increase in doing it at home. And after the vaccine, they're not all going back, right? This new normal is here to stay. This rethinking of approaches is something that is necessitated, right? And as we think about COVID-19's impact, obviously one of the biggest trends that we see is that companies are increasingly encouraging more working from home and adjusting IT spend to support this, right? But this is clearly the biggest trend or the biggest response. Even more important than more mobile devices or changing IT strategies or even moving aggressively to the cloud. However, it's not uniform, right? Europe is not necessarily homogenous. It's a heterogeneous mix of countries, right? And as we look at, those folks are looking to encourage more working from home and adjusting IT spend, it's not consistent across country, right? The biggest, most predominant response is from Russia, right? That is a huge initiative in Russia and Romania. Maybe not so much in the UK, right? A lot of it depends upon what the reality was before the crisis and what the reality now is in the crisis, right? And so you're hearing these themes of zero trust, zero trust, zero trust. And I think part of it is self-explanatory. Why has zero trust become such an important topic? Well, this isn't your network, right? It probably hasn't been your network for very long. I don't think any of us have known this reality for maybe 5 or 10 years. But we didn't really think about it until COVID hit. Now the reality of this not being our network and this being our network has hit us, and it hit us strong, right? And now all of a sudden, this renewed appreciation for the complexity of edge locations and IoT devices and this idea of corporate data centers and co-location and cloud and multiple clouds has really hit us. And not only is it about access, not only is it about the number of devices and number of environments, but remember, in security, we just don't think about access. Sure, we think about network connectivity and access, but we also simultaneously have to worry about application security, which is fundamentally different than network security. We have to think about the security of the data. Remember, as we talked about digital transformation, the fuel of digital transformation is all about the data. And the one bubble that kind of underlines all this is, right, the increasing role of identity, right? Who you are and the roles you can access are fundamental to that concept of least privileged access. So all of this reality is causing really a rethinking of those priorities that we talked about before, right? Because before COVID, right, digital trust programs were our biggest issue, right? We were driving digital trust. We were driving digital infrastructure resiliency, right? We were doing workforce transformation. Now COVID has re-architected this for us, right? Digital trust moved from 1 to 6. Digital infrastructure resiliency moved from basically a tie for 1 to 8, and workforce transformation dropped to the bottom. Well, what's taken its place, right? Resilient business operations, right? How do we keep the lights on? How do we keep business flowing? How do we keep revenue going? Customer experience programs, right? That moved from number 8 to number 2, right? How do we take care of customers? And I think one of the underlying themes that you're seeing consistently is this change from just viewing cybersecurity or just viewing trust to interject in this whole idea of resilience, right? How do we not only, block and prevent cybersecurity issues? How do we not only address, detect, and remediate? How do we recover if there's a problem? This recovery and resilience is becoming a bigger and a bigger theme, and it only makes sense. Resilience becomes a very popular topic when we're reminded of it in a time of crisis, like we are now. And as we're dealing with, this crisis, we're kind of reminded, like, we didn't have enough cybersecurity people before the crisis, right? And so as we start rethinking our approach to security, we have to keep in mind, we have to make tools more usable, right? Because, we saw this demand for growth in, 10.5 additional full-time equivalents are needed over the next 5 years in IT security. 9.6% were in cybersecurity, right? So making things more complex, making things harder doesn't work, right? We're looking for integrated solutions which we can reduce the demand on our cybersecurity professionals, because quite frankly, we don't have enough of them, right? They're our scarcest resource. And by the way, as you might expect, COVID didn't make this any better, right? So as we ask people, what will be the most important IT skills your organization needs to build, rebuild, and hire in the first wave of economic recovery? And which of the following technology criteria would be the most important, right? Cybersecurity is number one, right? And funny, it's not only number one globally, it's even of stronger demand in EMEA, right? And as we look at it once again, the EMEA region, Europe, it's not a homogeneous region. It's a heterogeneous region. And so you're seeing different layers there, where in Slovenia, over half, Spain, UK, Croatia, we're seeing 50% of respondents are making this their top priority, right? So by country, you're seeing a different issue in terms of the importance of cybersecurity. One theme comes in through. We cannot allow our cybersecurity tools to be complex, right? We need to start thinking about more integrated approaches to security to simplify and make things easier, right? Because we focus on the benefits, right? Because in security, we tend to get tacky, right? We talk about machine learning, and we talk about AI, and we talk about IOCs. We like to talk about the tech. The reality is, no one wants to pay for security, right? They want to be secure, right? They want to be resilient. They want to keep their operations flowing. They want to keep, providing products to customers, right? Theodore Levitt, his famous quote was, "Hey, people don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole," right? People don't want to buy security. They want to be secure. They want to be resilient. And so as we look at, which of the following buying criteria will be the most important in your next technology purchase, we're finding that sure, security is important, but product reliability becomes key, right? Because if the product isn't reliable, if the product is hard to use, what does that do? That creates demand on our precious cybersecurity resources, right? It creates demand for those people that we don't have enough of. Right? Sure, it's important for products to align with security, privacy, and industry compliance regulations, but being reliable, providing a solution is becoming especially important. And in this data, especially in Europe, it's increasingly important by far. And as we think about the effect of the crisis, in terms of, once again, thinking of it, we don't need a quarter-inch drill, we're looking for a quarter-inch hole. All of a sudden you're seeing in the COVID reality a larger awareness of what really matters, right? Because we did we launched this survey in mid-March, right? And it was really kind of a happy accident. So we were surveying SMB folks in terms of, in this question, we asked them to rate the relevance of endpoint security products and mitigating the following risks. Right. And before the crisis happened, right, we had a fair number that would say, hey, ransomware and phishing and business email compromise were important. But most people were worried about malware infection and propagation and leaking personally identifiable information. As soon as we hit, like April 2nd, and we looked at data from April 3rd on, like in the peak of all of a sudden everyone goes from home, all of a sudden the answers change, right? This awareness of what's important, the awareness of, hey, we need to protect this increasingly, work at home workforce is which much more relevant, much more important. And as we look at protecting these work at home people from things like ransomware and phishing and business email compromise, we're seeing that it really requires a systematic approach, right? Because we're dealing with a tale of complexity, right? Because we got a lot of high-risk data channels, internet access points, right? When Starbucks is your primary network, that realigns where your priorities go. If laptops or smartphones get stolen, remote access points, Wi-Fi phishing, email linkage, publicly, like these are all high-risk data channels that now our workforce is working in. But what's more important, it's not just the channel, it's the data types, right? And it's the high risk data types. It's our secrets, or it's encryption keys, our passwords, our credit card data, our personally identifiable information, right? The key here is there is a lot of high risk data channels and a lot of high risk data types that we really have to address, and we have to address systematically, right? Because it's complex. And so hitting on this theme of, what do buyers want? We asked them to rate the relevance of, endpoint security products in mitigating the following risks, in each of the following attributes, right? They want to be defended against malware, business email compromise, ransomware, right? And what are the relevant attributes? They want support for most personal devices and servers. They want highly rated AV. They want 24/7 technical support, right? There's a lot here. But one of the key themes we're seeing is this expanding and diversifying attack surface, right? Because we saw this data before where we were encouraging more work at home. But the one thing that we missed, once again, is this theme on resiliency. So, as COVID-19 impacts, all of a sudden we're seeing, we will increase our spending on disaster recovery and backup planning, right? Once again, what used to be just a concept or a conversation that was limited to just cybersecurity is now a conversation that I would call cyber resilience, which is how do we integrate the protection, the detection, the remediation, and the recovery in a complete solution, right? This would be a concept that Acronis calls cyber protection. We would call cyber resiliency. But once again, this increasing focus now on both cybersecurity and resiliency together is becoming very important. And as we look at this whole idea of the importance of disaster recovery and spending, right? It varies based on country, right? So if you look at, Romania, the UK, and Germany, right? Huge emphasis now in the post-COVID era, where, encouraging work at home, not as big a deal, right? This whole idea of increasing our spend on disaster recovery, incredibly important in some countries. So the way that we would advocate approaching this is something we call pervasive data defense and response. And the benefits of some of these are pretty straightforward. But looking at what we call pervasive data defense, it's all about taking a look at integrating your cloud security gateways, your or CASB, your secure web gateways, or web filtering, your DLP, but adding in other features like anti-malware, rights management, encryption, backup, security analytics, right? Coming at this from a data-centric perspective, which is about protect, detect, remediate, and respond and recover, right? And when you look at this holistically, it has a number of benefits, right? You think things like unified policy agent, right? Set once, proliferate across. Single management consoles. How do we make things easier for our security professionals? One console for them to work with. Consolidated our reporting framework, shared telemetry, content inspector, proactive vendor. Once again, instead of looking at this in terms of what is the best DLP, what is the best cloud security gateway, what is the best web security, what is the best backup, looking at it systematically and holistically in a solution set. So how do we change the measurement of our security products from just detection to what impact does it have not only on security professional productivity, but the productivity of all our employees? And so I think you're seeing this in the evolution of best practice. Now, IDC is a huge fan of NIST. I'm a huge fan of NIST, right? And if you look at their framework, and I stole this from their version 1.1 of cybersecurity framework, right? They talk about identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Great. This is a great NIST framework. But for me, there's kind of two things missing here. One, it kind of accepts our IT architectures as fixed, right? Because as we look at it, there's kind of a hole in there. And for me, that hole is rethink harden, right? How do we defend and prevent things from ever being realistic. Like one of the quotes that IDC likes to say is the best ROI in security is a deployed patch, right? Eliminating a vulnerability and eliminating the problem before it starts is absolutely, the easiest thing in security. And then the second attribute of that is information, right? Each one of these parts informs the previous sector, right? So that information flows from one part to another, once again, creating a holistic approach. So we don't just accept the current status quo as being set. When we look at, for example, our detection and response evolution, we're seeing this whole movement. If you're looking at light green, that's kind of what a tier 1 analyst does, and in purple, it's a tier 2 analyst. And we're seeing that we need to get more productivity from our tier 1 analysts, once again, because we've got a scarcity of cybersecurity talent, right? So how do we enable people to be more productive than the way they normally would? And one of those ways is to introduce, machine learning and AI. So machine learning allows a tier 1 analyst to be more effective, right? And so once again, it moves that box up. And artificial intelligence, guided search, guided AI allows them better efficiency. So if we increase the effectiveness and efficiency in our tier 1 analysts, we can get more out of them. And this is a really great analogy, and no one likes this metaphor better than I, because it's the reality, right? The ratio of level 1 to level 2 SOC analysts, depending upon where you are, is usually 2 or 3 to 1, right? The goal coming forward is to make it to 1 to 1. But the issue with this complexity is the best way to make our people more efficient is to eliminate the alerts before they happen, right? If I get 1,000 alerts a week and I can address 200 alerts, creating 200 more alerts isn't going to matter, because now instead of not responding to 800 alerts, now I'm not responding to 1,000. The better way to approach that is to not have the alerts happen at all. And so as we think of that not having alerts happen at all, the key approach to this is, for me, more aligned with the NIST cybersecurity resiliency objectives, right? Which we start with an idea of preventing and avoid. How do we stop those issues from happening in the first place? How do we create resiliency, from attacks? We prepare, we operate, we can, once we see an attack, we constrain it, we reconstitute or repair, we understand what happened, we transform our organization, and then we re-architect. And for me, the most important attribute of this is re-architecting, changing the way that we approach IT and security, rethinking our approaches, right? Thinking more in solutions, right? Thinking of the benefit. We don't want to buy security. We want to be secure. We want to be resilient. We want to maintain resilient business operations. So what does this mean going forward? What is COVID-19 moving forward? Well, we're still dealing with restrained budgets, right? We have a limited cybersecurity talent pool, and COVID-19 didn't help, right? We have the weight of established practices and processes. COVID is only accelerating the IT real estate and data ponds. We have unrelenting cyber threats, and they're only getting worse. We have a strategic imperative to adapt and be resilient. So what words would I have? Well, the first thing that I would say in summation is I would encourage you, don't rethink your approach to security, rethink your approach to IT and the manner that business applications and data services are provided to your users, right? Addressing security, without IT is just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it. Let's prevent the injury from ever happening, right? Because we don't want a suboptimal kludge Band-Aid mess, right? COVID-19 just accelerates the movement to implementing security around the 4 central control points, right? It didn't happen because of COVID. It was happening before COVID, but we realize now because of COVID that we have 4 central control points. endpoint, identity, applications, and data. And all our rethinking needs to focus on those 4 control points moving forward. And then finally, we need to retire legacy IT approaches, right? Connecting to a company network via VPN right now, it's not fun, right? Investigate software-defined solutions for business agility. VPN's a security tool, but stop for a sec. Nobody likes their VPN, right? How do we implement a passwordless solution, get people off of the corporate network, to create at least privileged access and reduce, help desk calls? And with that, I want to say thank you. I appreciate the time that you've taken. I realize in this era of COVID-19 that the days are long, your time is packed, and boy, time is a scarcity. And I just want to say, thank you on behalf of the Acronis Global Cybersecurity Summit 2020. I appreciate your time. Thanks and have a good day.